the final point up again, please. Go ahead. I can construct different loops there too, even though I do that. I took that, if you want it, I can do that with you later on. There's different ways of looking at that too. Well, in some sense, I understand what you're saying. We can comprehend in some sense, but we can't do it in a perfect sense, even though I wasn't saying that. No, what you're saying, maybe I'm taking too many liberties here. You might be right. But when I'm saying comprehend, I'm talking about at least we can deal with the world out there. The fact we comprehend doesn't mean I have perfect knowledge. We're getting an idea of what's going on there, and hopefully it's better than what somebody else has if we have to deal with it. So I guess maybe I'm using a loose form if that's your point. When I say comprehend, don't say that I've nailed it down. When I use the word comprehend, I'm not saying I really nailed it down. It means I comprehend something. But to say I really nail it down, I wouldn't say that.
Further we go.
Well, we might learn other kinds of things. We might pin some things down, but then they in themselves may generate problems in other areas, which then become a larger context, so then we lose some of the comprehension in a larger sense. In fact, what I've told people is, you know what progress is? You led me into it. I've used this before, and I'm glad you raised that point. You know what I say progress is? Confusion at a higher level. That's what we're talking about here. You see what I'm saying? In a sense, that's what you're hinting at. It's confusion at a higher level. Go ahead.
There's one example.
And of course, some people say maybe that's not progress either. I mean, they can chop me on that. That's a good chop too. Go ahead.
Use an example of John in a previous session we had talking about progress, and that the inquisitive, the people who are doing projects such as this, have to be constantly doing it, instead of asking the questions apply to those who think they already know. Progress example was looking at the F-111 and the offshoot of the F-111 being the two-air superiority fighter, which is eventually evolved into the F-15. Relate that situation process going through. They brought in the 111 for the new design.
You want the hard stuff, or you want the nice presentation? Well, let me tell you what I had to go through. This is a true story, and there's going to be some little rough stuff I'll bring out here, but it should be brought out, because you're going to have to face it. Since you raised the point, remember, let the record show he raised the point, I didn't. What happened was, I was down at Eglin Air Force, and I was known as a maverick, still am. Some people heard about that. But it turned out they were having trouble with an airplane they called the FX. And they were trying to get a new airplane beyond the 111, the one you're talking about there. Is that what you're getting at? Am I getting on the right track? Yeah, okay. I just want to be sure I'm on the right track. Okay. And so my initially was on orders to go to Vietnam. My orders were canceled by the chief, and I was brought to the Pentagon by General McConnell. And so they gave me 2 weeks to look at this FX proposal. And they asked me for my evaluation. The reason why they called me up there is because some work got done on energy maneuver building, other previous work, and they liked it. And for some reason, I was also a maverick, so if I goofed up, they had it both ways. If I did it right, they'd have a good airplane. If I didn't do it, they could throw me out of the Air Force, and I don't think some of them cared which way it went. So, in any case, I got to work on it. I looked at it. Of course, I really had to answer after a week. Really grim. I'm going to tell you how you get involved in this stuff. You're on something very important question. So, how was I going to present my evaluation? And of course they said, and also associated recommendations. Easy to make evaluations, always easy part. So my problem was not so much for the evaluation and recommendation, but how was I going to present it to get their attention? And so what happened was, I got to use some rough words here, ladies, because I had to get their attention. Sometimes you got to be mean. Because I knew they'd try to do it cosmetically. The whole idea up there is to do it cosmetically and pretend they do something new, and I had to get around that, and I knew that. So what happened was that, I'm thinking about this, see. I just arrived in the Pentagon, and so I thought over. I said, wait a minute, if I get rough, they'll throw me out, and I don't want to be here anyway. Well, I got a good deal. So what happened was, I went in, and two things happened. First of all, to show you how the system works on you, I was told I was going to have to render a report. Great. Of course, I knew what they were thinking, but I know what I'm thinking. And so the day before I could make my presentation to a higher level, as a major going to a senior colonel. Why this junior colonel comes in, he says, well, you haven't submitted your report. Your written report. I said, I'm not going to submit a written report. You said submit a report. I'm submitting a report. It's an oral report. You didn't say written. I'm giving an oral report. And it's on this yellow pad here. I didn't have charts. And my writing is terrible. I have a hard time reading it. And I deliberately wanted it that way because this guy was in a previous project that screwed up the airplane. And so if I submit it through him, he's going to pull out all the stuff that I want there. We're going to get a cosmetic thing. So I had a decision to make. So he got mad. He said, well, you're not going to get away with this. Well, fine. I don't want to be here anyway. So I had nothing to lose. So then he goes up and sees the senior colonel, and he calls me. He says, I understand you don't have a report. I said, that's incorrect. It's not a written report. It's a well-thought-out report. In any case, you can make your evaluation while I've thought it out, and we'll proceed from there. He's fair enough. So I went in. I was afraid of this guy. I'm not afraid of him mentally, but afraid that he might draw the wrong conclusion. I want to be sure he drew the right conclusion. In fact, this is going to come out in a book. It's coming out, so I might as well bring it out now. It's going to be in a book coming out here in the next couple of weeks. I'd heard it was in there. I'm not sure. You might as well hear it from the horse's mouth. I don't know how correct they have it. In any case, I went in there, closed the door. I didn't want to have the secretary listen to my nasty words. And I said, look, I'm going through this very carefully. I said, you know what? I've never designed an airplane before, but I could fuck up and do better than this. He went straight up. That's exactly the impact I wanted to get. Get him mad. Now he's going to have to listen carefully if he wants to take me out. On the other hand, if I got it right, I'm going to force him my way. Let the record show you raised it. In any case, what happened was, I went through it, and the key thing that I did, the evaluation, I said, okay, let me lay out 111, because that's the airplane we're going to replace. So I laid out the fundamental carriage. So go to the blackboard. I had my chart, had them all laid out. I said, have I said anything incorrect? Is it enough there we can make sense of it? Yeah. Okay. Now, let me lay out the so-called FX you're going to use to replace it, which is now we're down to the hard note. I laid out those characteristics. Okay. I said, is this the airplane you want? I said, now, if this is the airplane you want, I said, this is easy. I said, we don't even have to make this airplane. I can go back. I can show you what I used in the 111. I can show you how to do the wing. I can make some changes on that. It'd be very cheap. And we can get this 10% increase just by changing 111. Well, then he got even madder. Of course, I want him mad. I said, in other words, you don't like this 111. He says, absolutely not. I said, how can you like this FX? How can you defend this piece of trash? That's what I call it. I had his attention. I got him locked in. He said, well, I can't. He said, what are you trying to tell me? I said, white piece of paper, start over. Oh, my God, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. Said, we're talking about a white piece of paper. This is garbage. He looked at me. I remember that. Wait, he says, looked at me. I said, if you don't like it, I said, I'm not your guy. I said, get some jerk in here. He'll make it 10% better than you think you got something new. He said, okay. I want you to brief it exactly the way you briefed it to me. Take it down to General Dempsey. You start. He said, oh, incidentally, don't leave out about the part in the beginning about fucking up. That I want in there definitely, because I want to see his reaction like you looked at mine. He said, I'm ordering you to do that. Okay. Dempsey went through the rope. You can't talk that way up here. I mean, well, you got mad. And Richie was good. I ordered him to do that. And the reason why, because I want you to listen carefully to the rest of it. And he bought it all. So we changed it. History of that is, and we wiped out, started all over, did some real trade-offs. That was all phony baloney. And we initially had a 60,000-pound airplane. That was only on paper, too. With variable wings, 110-pound wing loading, 0.75 thrust-to-weight ratio. I forget a lot of other goddamn junk in it. And a whole engine, 2.2 bypass ratio, etc. And so then we ended up, after we went through the trade-offs, because he said, well, how are you going to do it? I said, well, I don't know what the answer is, but here's the way I approach these kind of problems. And I said, I expect we'll do a lot better. We came up with a 40,000-pound airplane with a 1.1 thrust-to-weight ratio instead of 0.75. Wing loading is 65, and I forget, and after a number, but a lot cheaper. And they had one that really, a real Hummer. And that became the F-15. We forced them to the trade. I remember we went to engine meeting, give you an example, engine meeting. See, all these engine guys, all they're worried about is turbo machinery and all this crap going on. And so I said, we got to start something fundamental on engine. We all got to start the same starting point. And I'm going to tell you, we're all going to start the same starting point. I'm going to see if you like mine. Here's what I know about the engine. Cold air goes in the front door. Hot air goes out the back door. It goes faster, and we call that thrust. Is that a good starting point? Of course, what it is, it's just a clever way of describing Newton's second law, FA=ma, you know, in a fluid sense. And they said, okay. I said, okay, so we're not going to hold. Other than that, we're not going to hold anything else as an assumption. That's the only one we're going to start with. We're going to work on that. We're going to look at the turbo machinery and all that stuff and see what holds together. What doesn't hold together, run the trades of the engine. Out of those engine trades, we actually boil the engine down to a 0.6 bypass ratio. They never thought that would happen. They weren't looking at it. As a matter of fact, we weren't sure to go 0.6 or turbojet. At that time, they didn't want to go any lower bypass. They said, well, it's fabrication problems and that. I was okay. So then eventually we decided on 0.6, but since then we found out we can make 0.3 and 0.4 lower bypass ratio engine. But at the time we did it, we couldn't do it. It was fabrication. It was a much better engine. But, I mean, that's the kind of stuff you got to do. You don't start. You got to challenge all assumptions. It's like, you know, we have doctrine. Air Force has got a doctrine. The Army's got a doctrine. Navy's got a doctrine. Everybody's got a doctrine. You read my work, doctrine doesn't appear in there even once. You can't find it. You know why I don't have it in there? Because it's doctrine on day one. Every day after it becomes dogma. That's why. And so what I tell people, they say, well, I understand you're going to have to write doctrine. You have to do it. And I say, that's all right. Even after you write it, assume that it's not right. And then not only that, look at a whole bunch of other doctrines, German doctrine, other kind of doctrines, and learn those too. And then you got a bunch of doctrines in there. The reason why you want to learn them all, then you're not captured by any one. Not only that, you can lift stuff out of here, stuff out of there, stuff out of there. You can play the snowmobile game, and you do better than anybody else. But if you got one doctrine, you're a dinosaur. Period. Go ahead. Uh-oh. The engineering chart, go ahead. Well, he asked me about remember, let the record show. Okay. Even though, in some sense, I was an individual, remember, I had to depend upon other people. I mean, I was doing I'm learning from a lot of these people at the same time in terms of some of these characteristics, even though I set up some of the plans and that. And one of the things I learned a long time ago, all the way up to Nellis and that, is any time that I got a team, I would get a very diverse kind of people in that team with very different skills, different orientation. And it was sort of instinctive. I understand better now why I do that. At that time, it was sort of an instinctive kind of thing. It seemed like the right thing to do. Now I understand better because of some of the things I've been involved in. Because I found out by doing that, I would learn a lot more. In other words, I'm drawing from many different ideas. But then after you think about that, you can do it not just with working with people, but many other things like doctrine and all the other kind of things I'm talking about. And in large companies, you have to do that. And that's why nowadays they're talking about these multifunctional teams. You heard about that in terms of new designs and all that stuff. And that's the key idea that Taiichi Ohno and Shigeo Shingo brought across. Where General Motors wasn't doing that. They had all these separate little compartments. And they'd get theirs done and pass the next department, get theirs done, pass, and all these guys in this department had like ideas. The guys in this department had like ideas, the guy in this department had like ideas, rather than having a variety of ideas within each department and very rich interconnecting links. And that's what Ohno and that's what Shingo brought to the table. I mean, they were sort of the orchestra leader, but without the orchestra, they can't play. They got to have these different things that are sort of keeping track of things and that. And so that's where the Toyota production system came out of. You know what Taiichi Ohno did? Since I didn't bring it up, since you brought it up, one of the things that he saw through it, he didn't see it. Even in the States here, we still don't understand what Taiichi Ohno did. Many people are writing about it. And I get mad when I said, this is baloney. I have read his book and I know what he's saying. And one of the things he found out, which is hard to believe, I'll tell you how he made his snowmobile, using my term, was he was looking at automobile production. learned a lot from Henry Ford and from other Americans. A lot of these ideas he got from Americans. And one of the key ideas he got was from supermarket, automobile production. Let me explain how he did it. Beautiful. It's brilliant. Brilliant. What happened was he had some Japanese after World War II, I don't know the exact period after. They were going to the United States and were trying to set up Toyota production. So he was the vice president of Toyota at the time. I think maybe general manager, but he eventually went to the vice president. And they went back to the States and they were very fascinated by American supermarkets. This is in the 50s. They didn't have those in Japan. And so they were very fascinated about that. So he's asking all these guys to come back. What do you do in a supermarket? And they're explaining to him. He wasn't even in one, but he had the right idea. How you took the cart and went around, grabbed all the stuff and checkout counter and all that sort of thing. And then he started thinking about that. He started thinking about automobile production and that. He says, well, we can fold that idea into automobile production. Supermarkets? Nobody ever thought about that before. Let me tell you what he does. We're thinking about it the wrong way. What we really want to do is when you're getting supplies coming to assembly line and all that, the various parts, and until you finally go to the assembly line and walks out the back door, we're doing it the wrong way. Instead of top down, we got to go bottom up. What we want to do is just like the customer goes in the store and picks stuff off the shelf, the later provider, in other words, you have the earlier provider, the later provider, the later provider. So he says, treat each later incident as the customer and the earlier incident as the provider. So we have a chain of providers and customers provided until ultimately goes out the door. And he said, what we want to do, instead of the provider giving to the customer tells the provider exactly what he wants and when he wants it, called the just-in-time system. He got out of the supermarket. So he sets a reverse information flow from the bottom up to the top, in which they only get what they want at the time they want it at. Using that supermarket idea. Instead of just pushing stuff down, the guy's got to put it together and goes out the door. And by doing it that way, by inverting the whole process, he was able to get a whole bunch of inventory out when he didn't have to have expensive inventory. Plus the fact, since they only wanted to amount, therefore, and since they're looking at it more carefully, they're not making as many goofs in terms of the automobiles. And there's some other things he folded in there in terms of what you call single-minute exchange of die and a whole bunch of other stuff by which they're able to actually run, but when they set that process in motion, they, instead of having a production line for this car, a production line for this car, and a production line for this car, they have one production line and run a whole mixed flow going down a production line, all different kinds of cars, and keep track and actually have higher quality with less labor. Beautiful synthesis. And the book's called The Toyota Production System by Taiichi Ohno. And you want to read it? There's another guy by the name of Shingo. Let me tell you what he did. In fact, he worked with Ohno. And they worked together. Very complementary skills. Very different guys, but very complementary, very strong-willed people. And what Ohno did is one of the key things that, Shingo, one of the key things that Ohno did, or saw, he saw it actually before Shingo did, but Shingo figured out how to do it. He said, the problem we have is that if you want to run more than one, they recognize they want to run more than one model down the line, but then they have a thing called industrial engineering. Some of you people might have heard, of course, economic lot quality, or quantity, optimal lots and that. And so if you make too small a lot, why then, economies go out the window. So in any case, Ohno figured what we really have to learn how to do is you have these die. What happens if you go to it, took a whole afternoon, 4 or 5 hours to change a die, and that was fast at that time. So then he gave an order to Shingo to see if he could fulfill it. He said, I want you to give me where we can have what he called, be able to change our dies in 10 minutes. Wow. And Shingo thought Ohno was crazy. But Shingo's the guy that knew how to do it. In the meantime, he'd actually been collecting information from working on all these different jobs over a number of years. He describes it beautifully in his book. He's got all this different information. And all of a sudden, after Ohno told me, he said, maybe we can do it. He's putting it all together. Ohno didn't know whether it could be done. He said he just gave it to Shingo. He didn't know what else to say. Gave him an impossible task. Guess what? Ohno did it. Nobody'd ever done that before. Then after he thought it over again, he started about thinking other stuff. He was able to do it down to 3 minutes and eventually got it down to 1 minute exchange of die. Well, then you have no longer an economic life. You can just change this stuff back and forth. And you have one production line, you just run different kinds of models. And he's drawn from all these different kinds of things. He's explaining all he's drawn from. Boy, is that guy ever building snowmobiles? So is Ohno. And they're drawn from other guys. And one thing interesting about Shingo all the time, when he hears somebody say something, he listens very carefully. He always talks about, I got to listen. He's saying something different. I haven't heard this before. He says, this one can think it's wrong, but it might not be wrong. It's only wrong because I haven't thought about it before. So you always have to be prepared. You notice how some people say, that's wrong. Didn't say that. I'm listening. In receive mode. In fact, we had a guy when he was up in the Pentagon, and we called him Dr. No. Boy, great logic. Fantastic logic. When we had the initial meeting, said a lot of the stuff, he'd come in here and destroy the whole thing. He always said, this can't be. I finally said, no way, you're out. Never come in here again until we're ready for you. So remember what I said? Observations, analysis, synthesis, hypothesis, and test. The test was to test it against him. After we had it all figured out, he said, boy, this guy really knows how to chop stuff. We're going to let him look at it at the end, not in the beginning. Never get him there in the beginning. Very sharp. Very qualified. So I brought him in the beginning. He had a skill. I said, Howard, you're not coming in here until we're ready for you. It's because if we bring you in here, we got a disaster. So I bring him in, and now let's chop it. He'd come in, so fine, out the door, wouldn't let him in again, rework the thing, ready, back in, out, back in, until we got it right. So he had a role to fill, and he did it very well. But not in the beginning. Go ahead. Well, one of the things is that, as I told you before, if I can go through my development loop faster in my head, in fact, I got some articles here I'm going to leave here, which is this, well, no, they're not discussed. Yeah, it is discussed in here. No, not the one I got. Damn, it's not in there. I thought it was, not in that one. But in any case, if you can go through and set up a faster tempo than your adversary, you're in effect doing that to them. And that's what Ono and Shingo did, what they were able to do. In the United States, we're better now. So when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about prior to 1988 or 89. Now we're getting better at General Motors. General Motors still got some problems before. They're turning things over from, in order to make a design, used to take us about at least 5 years. In other words, we had an idea till finally got the design, try to shove it out the door. You understand what I'm saying? Automobiles I'm talking about. What Ono and Shingo figured out how to do, I mean, as a result of their activities, it sort of fell out. I mean, they didn't start this way. It's sort of a fallout. They were able to start with a new idea on a design, come up with a new car, and do it in about 3 years or 2.5 years, about half the time. Well, think about that. If you're only doing half the time, instead of having those people working all a long period of time, it costs a lot less too. Plus, you get ahead of the marketplace. In other words, you capture the market before the other guy does. Plus, then you got it only going down a very few production lines instead of lots, so you have less expense there. So you see how you get. See what happened? We're shipping materials to Japan, raw materials. They make automobiles, ship the car back, and they still do it cheaper than we can. Well, not so much now because we got a currency problem, but before that. Well, that means, you got a very inefficient process if somebody can get away with that. Let me give you an example. You raise that point. A good example. It's in a book called Machine That Changed the World. Anybody read the book? It's called The Machine. It was written by MIT, a team up there at MIT that looks into automobile production, those kind of things. And there's one interesting, well, there's more than one interesting. This particular chart drew my attention. In which what they tried to do, they want to compare two models, Japanese model versus General Motors model, and particularly Toyota they were comparing. Now they couldn't get it exact, the cars aren't exactly, but try to get them as exact as they could. And over a month's production, or a couple months' production, number of cars put out, and then figure out the number of man hours that went into that car, or the labor that went into it. And at the end of it, then figure out how many man hours per automobile on the average over a certain period. And try to do it legitimate so you don't fix it where Japanese are high one month, the other one's low. In other words, on a apples versus apples basis. Well, having done that, what they found out, the average man hours for the Japanese per automobile, pump out a car, model they were talking about, roughly a little over 17 hours an hour, pump out a car. For General Motors at that time, it's the plant they looked at, typical plant, over 30 hours, things that recalls 32 hours. And none of that, Japanese quality was better. You can't win when you can't beat somebody if that's the way the game's being played. You can't compete. And so what you have to learn how to do is, in the end, an organization by itself doesn't come up with the idea per se. There's people working together, and then in the end, you sometimes you have to get off in isolation and draw from somebody else, figure it out, then go back in. You just can't be there in the hubbub all the time because otherwise you'd be like this. But in the end, you're still drawing from it. See, I learned from a lot of people. Remember what Newton said before he died? Anybody remember what he said before he died? Very famous statement. I don't know if I quoted it exactly, but I can at least paraphrase. He said, if I was able to see farther than anyone else, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants before he died. In other words, he drew from Kepler, he drew from Galileo, he drew from Descartes, he drew from, in other words, he's taking those bits and pieces and did it. I understand that.
Because, like, taking toilet paper in a way of stabilizing things, or a box, takes plant behavior, figures out something like in trying to look at new ideas, you can't sample the entire universe. How do you make that additional decision? But what is the bin compared to how? How do you make that additional person and what?
It's an excellent question. I'm not sure I got a good answer, but I'll try to answer. It's sort of an intuitive process. What I learned a long time ago is I like to look at different things. I found out somehow, I don't know when it's going to be valuable to be valuable later on, is what I've learned over a long period of time. And for some reason, I was able to see into that analytical synthetic process. So you just sort of have to look at different things, not knowing whether you're going to use it. Like when I first read that, when I read some of this stuff on, when I took Heisenberg, for example, when I took physics at Georgia Tech, I instinctively knew that Heisenberg principle had more bearing than what they said it had. I read it here. I said, okay, I understand what they're saying. I understand how they even derive the goddamn thing. But, you know, this just isn't atomic physics or subatomic physics. It must have bearing elsewhere. I mean, I didn't know, but it always in my mind. In fact, I just a few weeks ago at my physics book, I had stars all over that page, VIP, which means very important. And I didn't have it in the other page. This is very important. And the reason why I remember when I went back, because this was back in 1960. The reason why I remember that, because when I took that, I was very struck by that. You have to be sort of struck by certain things because of your experience and be open.
Sure.
Yeah. But the key thing to do that is don't try to assume that something is wrong because it doesn't fit into your orientation and say, well, that's wrong. I don't do that. Initially, I look at it and say, I wonder what he's saying here. Am I thinking about that? I always deliberately try to caution myself. I want to see, what I always try to do, and here's a key point that I try to do. This is a key point. When I'm reading something new and different, I try insofar as possible as I can, is to try, and you can't do it exactly. Can I see it through his eyes, not mine? In other words, I want to adopt his point of view, suck up his point of view, so I don't let my own orientation drown out what he's trying to tell me. And you have to do that in the beginning. Now, it took me, when I was younger, I didn't do that. When I became a fighter pilot, that's when I learned how to do it. My experiences at Nellis had a very deep impact upon me. I know that. Other people know that. For some reason, because it was 19th century, I call it, I had a degree in economics. God, this is great. This is like 19th century capitalism in the sky. Everybody's a freebooter, a buccaneer. This is fantastic. We can do whatever the hell we goddamn please. Those generals don't know what the hell we're doing. We did it. Of course, we lost a lot of guys. Well, you can look at, I would say you can look at what. That's a good question, yeah. I would say don't be too narrow each one. Each guy will have his own skills. But then the thing I'm going to say, because you're going to bring to the table certain skills. What's your background? What's your background? Okay, but other people might have biology background, psychology, or different kind of background. So don't feel like, geez, I'm intimidated. Bullshit, you got a background to bring to the table. You got a goddamn good background. And so what you want to do, though, is don't allow yourself to go into the trap because you have a certain kind of a background to check out these other ways. Well, that's theirs and that's mine. What you want to, insofar as possible, if you don't understand, make them explain it again. I used to make people, I don't understand you. Tell me one more time. I'm a dumb shit. Till I get it right. In fact, here's a good thing. You raised me to another point that I used to tell people. Let's say I ask a question to you. I say, okay, here's my question, whatever it is. Now, you're going to say, okay, you're going to, in your own mind, try to respond to that question, right? I might look at it and say, geez, I don't like that response. So now I reform the question, maybe to you or to somebody else. They pump a response back in. I'm not sure I like that response. In other words, I don't seem like I have a good matchup between a question and response. So then I ask somebody else a question. I keep going through this till finally I say, boy, now I got a matchup. Now let's examine that process. When I ask the first question to you, I get a response. So probably what's going to happen, I may treat that question a little bit differently. Say, well, maybe I didn't say it right. You might want to say it a different way. Might pump it back to you, or maybe to somebody else. So as you go through, and you go all the way through that thing, so then the question you have to ask yourself, what's the purpose of the question in the first place? Now, having gone through this in my mind, I'm asking a rhetorical question. It's unfair for me to ask you and ask you to draw it out right away. If you haven't thought about it, of course, you may hit it. You may have gone down a similar line of thought. So I'm asking not to embarrass anybody, but as a rhetorical question, because I've gone through these kind of processes. And the whole reason why I say that, what's the purpose of the question, is to find the right question. Because my initial question might have been a dumb goddamn question in terms of a context. So in that context, there are no dumb questions if they lead to the right question. Don't be afraid to ask a dumb question. Those guys that ask the right question right off the bat means they've already gone through this process and they're trying to impress people. Because a lot of these goddamn meetings, everybody's trying to see who's going to be top dog rather than trying to figure out what we're going to do. So don't be afraid to ask that dumb question. Because then you can adjust it until finally you get to the right question.
You're going to stay around?
No, I'm done. I'm sorry I took all your time.
Boyd will be here.
You can turn it off.